Fractional CMOs hit the ground running. Hi, I'm Dean Way. Welcome to Fractional CMOs and the 90-day win. There's a lot of variety in how they kick off a new client engagement. There's so much variety. It's valuable to just listen to what opportunities they look for, what they tackle first, and excuse me, and what they wish wasn't true when they start a new project. So let's find out. My. Sorry. Okay. So, hi, Amanda.
Hey, Dean.
Okay. So, Amanda, imagine we've got our hypothetical 1-year engagement. Today was the first day. Okay. We'll talk about early wins. Not quite yet, though. And so, what sort of big problem or big two problems do you normally find, or do you like to go looking for on day one because you know they're there somewhere? Oh, and tell the audience who you are.
All right. Well, first I'll start with, hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Rabideau, a fractional CMO at Arch Collective. And before starting Arch, I was in marketing at CoreLogic. They're a really big data analytics firm for the real estate space. Since then, I've worked with more than a few dozen startup companies and helped them build a data-driven marketing engine and, of course, a marketing strategy. Mostly these companies are in the insurtech and the prop tech space, but I've also worked with some health tech and other industries as well. And Dean, the way I want to answer your initial question, yes. I wouldn't know if it's a problem per se that I go looking for, but one of the first things that I like to uncover, and it seems so simple, but it's often not done well, are the business goals. So I work with a lot of startup companies, as I mentioned, and while they're like, oh, I know we need to get more clients, or we need to increase revenue, or we need to roll out these new versions of our offering. When it's like, what are your goals for 2023, 24, 25, whatever the year is, it's often very broad. And so when I'm starting out with an engagement, I want to know not your marketing goals. I want to know your business goals, because I see my role is to determine what are the marketing goals, or what are those things we need to accomplish in order for the business to achieve their broader goals.
Do they normally know their goals?
I would say it's surprising that a lot of times this isn't something that's formally documented. Right. It may be like I said, oh, we need to increase revenue, or we want to get 5 new clients, or pick whatever the metric may be. But is it something that not only they're telling marketing, but the product team knows, the IT team knows, like, is everyone aligned to the same business goals? Because then we can determine, okay, what is our role? And then get alignment across the organization on those roles to make sure we meet the broader business objectives. But, maybe let's say 50-50 if I had to put a number to it.
All right. I'll leave it with you if that's a high or low percentage, but that's good. Fine. And Jill, how about you? Tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and what sort of 1 or 2 problems or things do you normally like to go looking for, or you expect to find when you start a new client engagement?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me today on the podcast. So I'm Jill Richards with Think 10X. I'm a transformative technologies marketer that helps fearless startups grow. I work with a lot of tech-forward startups, venture-funded, privately funded, and they usually are in B2B software, data, security, clean tech, and they usually make something really complicated that they need to find a market that resonates with that in order to grow, and a market that's big enough to matter. So I'm also an AI enthusiast and a wildlife conservation supporter. So if those are topics that interest anyone, please feel free to reach out. So just echoing what Amanda said, it's not always that I'm looking for a specific problem. I'm really looking to assess what the major issue is. But one of the things that I find happens a lot is that as Amanda was saying, for me, the corporate strategy is often not set. And so not just the business goal, but also the strategy about how we're going to go after that. And so that relates to whether other groups know that the corporate strategy is set. Does sales know that the corporate strategy is? Does marketing know what it is? Does product know what it is? Are we all working together on the same thing? But also they tend to be doing not strategic acts of marketing, but random acts of marketing. And so you really want to tie that corporate strategy to the marketing strategy. And I find that a lot of times what's missing is not just the strategy, but actually a deeper understanding of the positioning. So they don't really understand how they fit into the competitive market space, into the tech stack, into the minds of their buyers, et cetera. And so those three things are all kind of related, but I find that a lot, I would say, in 90% of the companies that I work with.
So then, Jill, is there anything sort of that you like to kind of try to knock out early, like any early wins that you try to like knock out, once you get started while you're still doing the sort of longer term stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, it all starts with the market. So really trying to understand as best we can what we have to work with in understanding the market. So do we have a bunch of customers that we can talk to about why they buy? Or if we have none of those because it's too early or we don't have enough that look like what we want going forward, what do we know about our true differentiators and how we're messaging against that? So I definitely look for those things, but also, as Amanda said, the goal setting. So I think when I usually come at that through a goal setting process. So it's like, what are we trying to achieve? And how are we going to measure that? And how do we know if we succeed or if we win? And are we able to actually track and measure the things that we want to track and measure? So those are kind of the early things that I would focus on.
And Amanda, how about you? What are like the early kind of wins you go for? And what do they look like when you do them?
Yeah. And I think Jill and I are very much aligned on a lot of, maybe this is the gist of this conversation. We'll have a lot of agreement. But to echo what Jill said, I like to start with the customer or the client, the end user in mind, because the more we can understand who it is that's going to be driving, because usually marketing is about growing a pipeline, bringing in more leads, making sure that we're attracting the right customers. So, first, let's start with, well, who is it that we're going after? Is this the right audience? Assuming that it is, then there's a lot of building, like, do we have the right messaging? Looking at the metrics, auditing what they've been doing. Jill, you kind of alluded to this, like you can get into a new client and they're, I always joke, like the marketing team, when I come in, it's like, oh, the founder's younger sibling just graduated from college and knows social media, ergo knows marketing. And I'm like, yeah, marketing's a little more than like knowing how to follow someone on TikTok per se. And so there's both like identifying, okay, what of the foundation either needs to be built or needs to be updated, made stronger. And what are some of the things potentially that we need to unwind that have already been done? They've been already, out there in the marketplace, let's say launching campaigns or going to events. Like, what have you been doing? How has it been working? If it hasn't been going well, how do we unwind that? So a lot of it is just that auditing or assessment phase, which I know clients hate to hear, but it's important to know where we are today so that we know how we can move forward tomorrow.
I think that's another area
not
of low-hanging
but
fruit.
Got to get it done.
Yeah, I think that's another area of low-hanging fruit is putting some scaffolding around the things that they're already doing. So sometimes they're going to a lot of events, but they're not capturing leads well, or they're not following up on the leads well, or they're not really targeting the events well, or advertising or social media. They're not necessarily making the most of what they have there. So that's another area of low-hanging fruit for sure.
So, Amanda, in that case, you show up and we talked about goals and not necessarily what else do customers sort of like not see in their marketing that's in place, or what do they normally not know about, marketing when you start with them? Maybe you're the first ever CMO of any kind.
I think there's a few things, but one that I'll touch on is that marketing, we're no longer the arts and crafts department that maybe people thought we were 10, 20 years ago, right? Marketing is extremely, components of marketing, I should say, or most of them should be extremely data-driven, right? I mentioned I like to build a data-driven marketing engine. Well, there's lots of things to measure, and there's ways that marketing can contribute to revenue and to a P&L. Like, we're not just there to make things look pretty. So, one of the things that I like to come in and do is educate or re-educate folks on the team or the client. What is marketing? Like, what does that mean? What is it today versus what is your general understanding of it? As most of the founders I work with are more technical founders, they're not necessarily those with the sales and marketing background. So that's one piece, is just the education of where marketing can fit into your organization and how we can contribute and make impact. The other piece would be that yes, leads are important, but there's a lot of different things that go into building that pipeline and those leads. Right. Your messaging, your channels, Jill alluded to, like, the more we understand our positioning in the marketplace. Those are just a few. And so often they're focused on the outcome, which is the leads, the closed deals, the revenue, but it's like, let's focus on getting these things right at the top. And then that should lead to a more efficient, cost-efficient, more effective, higher conversion rate funnel where they'll see the results at the bottom coming out.
Jill, how about you? What do you find that people don't sort of know or understand about their business or marketing until a CMO is finally hired?
Yeah, well, a few things. I think a lot of time I work with a lot of tech forward companies, so they're very focused on the technology and the products that they're building. And right. One of the things that they often miss is that the technology is not a company and it's not a product. So the code is not a product. There's a bunch of other stuff that goes around the product. There's the user experience, there's the support, there's the marketing and the sales outreach. There's a lot of other things that go into making it a product, onboarding, like all kinds of things. So sometimes they haven't really thought that through. They sort of have something that works. They have a prototype that works, but they don't necessarily haven't really thought through how they're going to take it to market and what that really means. And similar to what Amanda is saying, I run into the same thing, that I think people don't understand the breadth and depth of marketing a lot of times. So they think of it as sort of the outputs that they see, the tactical things. It's the advertising or the data sheet or the event that you go to or other things that they can sort of interact with. But just like with building a product, which is how I explain it to them, you have a lot of different people on the team who have different specialties. So in your dev team, you have people who are great with databases, and you have great people who are great with UI or UX. You have different skill sets in that team. And the same is true for marketing. It's a discipline. And it actually is a hybrid discipline that covers both creative and analytical aspects. Mm-hmm. So it's the marriage of those things. But I think the other thing people don't really understand is that there's a lot of touch points, and Amanda alluded to this, but there's a lot of, to get to the point of a lead, there's a lot of work that goes into that. And there are many different ways that people interact with you through marketing, and that marketing can actually help in the revenue cycle. But there's generally not a great understanding of that. It's fairly narrow. So I think broadening that and explaining that is an important one. And I think one of the other ones is that people don't always understand what a marketing person should do. So is it just social media, or is it PR, or is it brand and design, or is it demand gen? And it's all of those things. So a CMO really needs to be conversant across the entire spectrum for marketing, and kind of figuring out what they need and where they need it.
All right, fair enough.
And Jill, I want to piggyback on that real quickly, because I agree, right? The CMO does need to understand all those different tools in the proverbial marketing tool belt. Yeah. Something that I think is equally important is the understanding on the client side that just because the CMO understands it doesn't mean that that's the person that should be executing it, right? It's like, I would say it's rare that you can find a CMO that is, the perfect PR person and the perfect demand gen and the perfect product marketer and all these things, right? Yeah. The role of the CMO is to say, okay, here's all the different tools we should be using to optimize and, get to help you achieve those goals that we identified. But then we might need to bring in other experts to actually execute and implement that strategy. Because Jill, I don't know if you've seen this, but certainly in my earlier days, and I see it less now, is I'm better at explaining what I do and the value I bring, where like you come into a startup company and they're like, hey, CMO. And they're like, great, you can update the emails, you can write our press releases, you can do all the things. and I know how to do those. I know what's good, but that doesn't mean that it's cost efficient or makes sense for your CMO to actually be like executing on all of that too.
Yeah, and that might be another area where people don't have a great feel for what they should invest in marketing. I hear a lot that they don't understand the ROI of marketing, and they really want to be able to say, if I put $1 in here, will I get $2 out somewhere else or $3 out somewhere else? And I want to get to the point where I can see that. And that's a challenge for lots of reasons, attribution models, et cetera. But I think you're right that it doesn't always connect directly to what you're putting in. So there's a lot of foundational stuff that you have to kind of get all of marketing together, and then you can turn that into a revenue machine. But it's not necessarily that if you get, you do one campaign or you get a great designer or you do a brand redo, that's going to translate immediately into a trackable thing. And I think that's really frustrating for technical people and data-driven people. So I think there are aspects of marketing that are very data-driven and aspects that are less so.
Yes.
So, Amanda, like you probably know a lot of fractional CMOs. I know a lot of fractional CMOs, hundreds personally of fractional CMOs. Other than treating a fractional CMO like they're part of the executive team, if I'm a CEO, right, and let's say I'm about to hire, or I just hired in this example, I just hired my very first ever fractional CMO. Like, how do I squeeze every last penny of value out of this person in the 1 year that I'm going to have them? Like, squeeze all that value out of them. How do I do it? Tell on yourself.
I feel like I should ask my clients that question. Like, how have you really squeezed this value out? No, I think it's sort of goes along the lines of how you started this question, which is the more you treat them like they're actually a part of the team, the more you're going to get out of them. I think that, and what I've observed sometimes and experience this a little bit in clients is that they're like, okay, you're fractional, you're not part of the full-time executive team. So like, let's keep you over here and we'll let you know as you need to know. And, over time, I usually manage to convince them to like, hey, let me in on those executive team meetings, because how I try to explain it, and I'll be pretty straightforward with you here, which is you don't know in those meetings what I need to know and what I don't need to know. And so if you're filtering this information, there's going to be things lost that could potentially be helpful to how I manage the team or how I drive the business forward, aligned to those objectives that we talked about. And so if you get me in those meetings, and this is 9 times out of 10, what will happen is they're like, oh, wow, this touches marketing and that touches marketing. And oh, Amanda can provide input here. And oh, that's good perspective there on that piece. And that marketing, if they don't involve the fractional CMO and like embrace them with open arms and include them in more, they're missing out on some of the value that fractional CMO can offer and the perspective that they can bring. And so I would say, any client, I always say, look, the more you get me involved, the more I can do, because the more I know.
So Jill, Amanda answered that question in 2 ways. So she talked a little bit about getting value. She talked a little bit about how not to waste the money you're spending on a fractional CMO. What are some other examples possibly of how companies waste the money they spend on a fractional CMO, or they actually figure out additional ways to get value out of that person?
Yeah, well, I think Amanda hit on some of the ways that they do that earlier, which is that they want a lot of the tactical stuff and they want that done by the CMO. And I'm actually a person that does that. I've been the single person in a marketing department before. I've run the entire thing and done it. And I enjoy doing all the bits and pieces of marketing, so I'm okay with that. But it's true that it's not really the highest and best use. So I think the most important thing is to sort of let go of any assumptions you have about what this person should be doing and focus on solving the problem that you're trying to solve. Mm-hmm. So figure out what the goals of the business are and figure out how this person can help you and take their expertise to heart. So, Amanda mentioned, let me in the room, let me see what's going on, so I can best help you, because the more information I have, the more I can help you. And I think that's absolutely true. But I think also let go of your preconceptions about what marketing should be doing and what lane it should be in and how it can help. Because I think we're also strategists in a lot of ways. And so we can really help the company. And our goal is to help the company grow, not just to help marketing be better. So I think let us in to do that, and and get an understanding of what the expertise is and how they can help. So a lot of times I come in and as Amanda said earlier, they ask for something like, we need to increase top of funnel. That's a very common one.
I live at the top of the funnel. I'm very happy that they want to. All my money comes from there.
And there's a lot of work to be done at the top of the funnel. So that's great, but it isn't always actually the problem. So sometimes the problem is the messaging is off. Sometimes the problem is the sales process is terrible. Sometimes the problem is we're talking to too many people. Mm-hmm. So instead of, if you're only going to say success is that we've solved this top of funnel problem, that might be a little limiting. So I would say, take advantage of the expertise that the fractional CMO has, and make sure that you let them help you when they tell you that there are parts of the problem that aren't working.
I'd love to follow up on your point that marketers, we can help be business strategists. And, one small anecdote is when I was at a very large enterprise, and we had, the revenue for the P&L was upwards of 500 million. The marketing budget was significantly less than even 1% of that. Mm-hmm. And I want to say it was less than 200,000. And the expectation is, okay, we're doing all these things. And I think that isn't uncommon, that marketers are given, while the best practices may be, the budget should be, X percentage when your company's at this stage. Yeah. It's rare, if ever, that marketing gets that budget. And so that, I think marketers, there's a scrappiness in us, right? Because we've never been given what we've needed in order to get and help the company achieve those results and goals. And so we have to be strategic, right? We have to figure out, okay, how do we make this work? Because, I've got $1 to spend, but I need to get $5 worth of work done. And so there's, I always am so impressed by when I come in and what marketers have done and what they do, because so often we have to be so scrappy and creative and strategic so we can get ahead of the game in order to, use make the most of the budget that we have.
Yeah. And I think budget is a big area of misunderstanding. So a lot of times they're like, well, we have a big budget, but it's all going to advertising, which is all going in the wrong place, saying the wrong thing or not yielding what they want. So reconfiguring that would be good. But my first job as a technology marketer, I had zero budget. I had to barter everything for website traffic.
200,000 of 500 million means that the marketing budget was 0.4 of a percent of the revenue. Now that's a bit tiny by any standard, I think.
Well, and to be fair, that didn't include headcount and things like that. Sure. But it's illustrative of what we were given. And in fairness, I think that prepared me so well for now what I'm doing, because we had to make some magic happen. You had to pull the rabbit out of your hat. Right. And I think that, for good or for bad, marketers are often able to do that, right? Where we can kind of make magic happen. And sometimes I don't even know how it happens, but it just does. But it's not something that should be the strategy. Marketing will make magic happen. Because, Jill, kind of going back to do they have business goals? I don't think I've ever gone to a client, I think I'm 0%, where I've said, okay, so what's the marketing budget you have for 2024 or 2025, pick your year. And that they've said, it's X. Usually it's well, you tell me, or I don't know, we hadn't really thought about it. So budget is sort of an interesting space when it comes to marketing.
Yeah.
There was another guest on another episode going back to the point about not about the budget, but about sharing information. Mm-hmm. And that guy had a great quote. He says, Dean, sometimes you go into a business, you go into a client, they turn on the overhead lights for you. Sometimes they just give you a flashlight. You can guess which one gets the most value out of their fractional CMO.
Right.
So there you go. Okay, then let's wrap it up. Last question then. So in our hypothetical example, we've been, mostly talking about the first 90 days, but okay, it's at the end. And like any kind of business, and like you guys are each independently and, have your own businesses, right? You're talking to many more prospects than will ever become clients, right? Naturally. Unless your closing rate on sales is so good that you close everyone who ever talks to you. But nobody's like that. Okay, so here's my question, right? So you're already, in the prospecting and sales process for the next client. What are the red flags that this company or this CEO should not be hiring or is not ready to hire a fractional CMO yet?
Go ahead, Amanda.
Whoever wants to take it first.
So some of the red flags, or in general, I would say, one, when I hear a potential client say, I worked with a previous agent, fractional CMO, insert whatever, and they just didn't get it. That's a red flag to me, because I've been on the other side where it may be that client, they don't actually know what their business is or who their audience is or where they want to go. So, much like when you go to the doctor, they rarely disparage the diagnosis of another doctor out of respect for that particular doctor's experience. I try and do the same, where it's like, I don't know what happened. I wasn't there, but I've certainly been the marketer where it's like 20 versions later of a document and they're like, this still isn't right. You don't get it. And it's like, do I not get it? Because I'm trying to reflect back what you're telling me or what have you. So I think when I hear like something as broad as they just didn't get it, that's a red flag for me from a client perspective.
If all of your exes are jackasses, it's probable that you're the actual jackass.
You're the common denominator.
Yeah, I'll let you say that. And then as far as like if they're not ready for a fractional CMO, I think that comes with, depending on what stage of their business. Jill, you work with startups, I do. I'm really candid with like really early stage startups. I'm like, I don't know if you need a CMO right now. Like I'm happy to advise you or give you best practices, but some of this you can either do yourself or you can hire other people or you can be scrappy at this stage, because sometimes, it's like, we don't even know enough to make bringing me in worthwhile. And I always try and be really cognizant of capital, right? Because one, especially now, it's a really challenging fundraising market. And so the money they have, they need to eke out every little cent. They need to make it last for 12, 18, maybe even 24 months, depending on the industry. And so being cognizant of their capital. And so I'd rather say no, because if I don't feel like it's right, I don't want to just take their business for the sake of it. So I think the stage of where their business is at, what their capital situation is, and what they're trying to achieve, the combination of those may mean that they're just not ready for not only a fractional CMO, but a CMO or maybe any like really senior level marketing hires.
Well said. I agree. So I would add to that phrases like "we have no competition" or "we sell to anyone who will buy" are not indicators that they don't need marketing, but they're indicators that they may not be in the headspace to actually accept the marketing that's going to need to change things. So I think, Dean, you talked about getting people from a state that they don't like to a happy state that they do like. You have a better phrase for that.
The negative future and shortcutting them to the positive, the negative present. They're in a negative present. Otherwise, there's no problem solved.
That's right.
The promise of every business is I'll shortcut you to the positive future if you give me money. We don't say the last part out loud, but everyone understands what's going on.
Yeah. But I think that positive future, if they haven't really thought about that as meaning that they're going to have to make changes, then that's probably a red flag. So that it could be anything. It could be how much they're spending. It could be the fact that they need to change the personnel. They need to not only have their social marketer as their marketer kind of thing, or that they need to consider that they're going to have to take a hard look at how competitive they are or how well positioned they are to compete in the marketplace and act on that in order to get to that positive future. So if you kind of get a read for that, if the eyes are glazing over when you're talking about that, and it's like, yes, but what events do you think we should go to? When you start to get those kinds of questions and that disparity, then you start to feel that maybe a fractional CMO isn't what they're ready for yet.
And right. Dean, if I know we're getting close to the end, but if I can throw one thing out there, because both of you have thrown out these really awesome phrases and metaphors, and so I want to get my chance at one.
Jill, you mentioned my judging face to see if it's good enough. Okay, go.
Okay, all right. Well, feel free to give me feedback. Jill, when you were mentioning that they're like clients, when they say that they'll take any source of revenue, that's a red flag. I actually call that FOMO of revenue, the fear of missing out on revenue, right? Yeah. Where it's like, and I get it, right? Where you're like, oh, I need money to get my to run my business, and my investors, if you have them, are breathing down my back to make sure I'm hitting these different targets. But agree that if you're trying to go after the whole world, kind of going back to my budget example, if you've got 5 audiences and you've got $5 to spend, you can only spend $1 on each one. Why not take $5 and put it towards one audience and go really fast at them? So Dean, FOMO of revenue, that's my...
I've not heard that one before.
It's something
I haven't either. That's a new one.
Yeah.
Good one.
Feel free to use it.
They won't differentiate. They won't position. They won't pick a niche because they feel like they're leaving money on the table. Yeah, that's a good one. All right. Yeah, that's good. Good job.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Dean approved.
Yeah, Dean approved. Okay. So thanks so much. Basically 2 questions, or one 2-part question for each of you. It's the same question. Amanda, you go first. So, stuff's on the screen, but how should people get in touch with you, and who should get in touch with you? Or who should not get in touch with you?
Well, I would say B2B tech startup founders, usually those who have some product market fit, are the best to get in contact with me if you're looking for a fractional CMO. If you're looking for more project-based work or advisory work, then I would say your stage of funding and where you're at isn't as important. Either really is your industry. As I said at the beginning, I've worked with dozens of startups across industries. And so, happy to provide my perspective as an advisor or create your messaging, and so on. And the best way to reach me is you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on YouTube, or you are welcome to go to my website. And there's plenty of ways to drop a form to us, and I'll be sure to get that information and follow up with you.
Jill, who should get in touch with you, and what's your preferred way for them to do it?
Yes, very similar. So B2B startups in technology are my favorite. So I love transformative technologies. I mentioned data, cybersecurity, AI, or clean tech. All of those are great. And the stage matters a little bit less than kind of what they're trying to do. So I love to work with startups that are trying to either pivot or scale. So they've kind of gotten to a certain level and they need to go to the next level. And so those are the kinds of CEOs that I love to help. And they can reach me at my website, which is jilljrichards.com, or on LinkedIn, and happy to talk to you there.
All right. And that's it for this episode. Thank you both so much. This was, I was about to say it's more fun than usual. That's not very nice to anyone else. I might have to edit that part out, but, or not, God knows I'm willing to say weird stuff, but thank you both of you. Thank you for joining. Thanks everyone, and see you in the next episode.